Hi, this is Sally Wood for Be Inspired, and today I'm going to be showing you how to do a new cover for an Ottoman or a footstool, depending on where you are and what you call them. And I will warn you, it can be quite a workout, but well worth the challenge when it's done. First thing I'm going to do is remove this bottom cloth. I'm using a tack remover which has this V in it. You can use a flathead screwdriver if you want. And I've got a pair of pliers as well. You angle the tack remover or the flat-headed screwdriver along the side of the staple and ease it up. And, actually these ones are pretty easy to get out. Sometimes they're horrible. And if you can't get them out, use your pliers and just ease them out. Don't just yank on these because it will strain your hands. Taken one side off, and now I'm going to do the cover. Personally, I like to do one edge at a time. I get bored. Again, taking the cover off, use your tack remover to remove the staples. There's no right or wrong way on doing this, so long as everything comes out, that's all that matters. Now I've left this in situ. Getting those out is going to be difficult, so I will be leaving those and the bottom cloth still attached. This is just time consuming, but well worth the effort if you do it properly. Some people don't, and I just don't get. I mean, if you're going to do a job, do it well the first time. And then I'm just going to look back and make sure that all my staples are out. If I've messed up a little bit on them, I bang it into place like that. I've got all of the top done, and I've peeled away this foam from this fabric because it was quite stuck on. Each of these is done differently. This one's got the metal. Okay, so that's been stapled there too. I have to now work around and remove all of this. It's like I'm peeling an onion. There's many layers sometimes. So I'm just going to undo this, pull these out. I'm going to keep this foam. I'll probably have to alter it slightly. So I'm just going to peel this away too. Over the years it's become attached to the foam, which isn't what I want. Oh dear, we'll have to see whether I can rescue any of this. I should be able to, and I can undo that too. If I peel that down, I can see there's back tacking here, so I'm going to work on that next. All of this has to come off, and I think I'll remove the foam too, only because I want to make sure I can save it. The principle of removing it is the same as before. So as I move around, I'm going to undo this part too as I get to any staples. Slowly all of this will peel off. Try not to do any damage to things if you don't have to. And then as I peel that back, I might find some staples keeping this in. Oh, actually it looks like it might have been sewn. I think it was sewn to something, so we'll find out as we get there. Each company does their thing differently, so it's always hit and miss. But as you can see, I'm just slowly working my way along here. And as I get to the end, I'll be able to see what else needs to come out on this side. I can put my fingers underneath here, so if I do that you'll see, which means that they have attached this border onto the piping and just pulled it in real tight. So that's not too bad. I can pull that out in a minute. Seeing as I'm not keeping it, I'm going to cut that out, and then I can start opening it up. Or maybe not. Let's see where I can go this way, because this was pulled in tight too. So if I remove these, maybe I can undo this as I go and roll that down a bit. When you're working on things, you've got to work out how they were put together in order to get the best results taken apart. I prefer not to leave staples in things, just in case they rip my fingers to pieces. I try not to leave anything that might be a problem. And that looks like it's going to pull out. So I might not need to do all this undoing. I might just be able to pull it out like that. As I say, if you find out how your chair or your footstool was put together, it gives you clues on how to undo it. That part was the time-consuming part, working out how to undo it, which might mean that this is stapled on under here. And if I get my tack remover under here, I should be able to ease it. There we go. That is going to make life a lot easier. So people do these all in different ways. So now I'm going to use brute force and a bit of ignorance to get some of this out. Anywhere there's a staple in the foam, I'm going to remove that, otherwise I'll be ripping up the foam. Then these ones, as I pull it, I can undo all of these at the same time. Then they don't fall on the floor and they don't make a mess. I'll be able to pull this one down in a minute. So I'm just going to work my way around. First of all, removing them from the foam, because I can roll the foam away like that as I go. The advantage, if you've got a bunch of fabric to keep hold of, you often don't need to use a hammer, because all you're doing is pulling, put a bit of pressure on, and then easing everything up as you go, like that. Then you can use your pliers to remove the staples. You see, I'm just pulling this down and then work back. There's a couple more here that I need to take out, like that, and take this one out too, and then I'll have quite a run to do with the cover. Move that just a wee tad, and then I'll be pulling on this like that, and it all comes out. Sometimes these just fall out, they're not, so I'm going to just leave them there. But what I do is roll that over it so I don't hurt my fingers, and then I'll go on to the next part until the whole of this cover is off. So most of this is just time consuming. Once you've worked out the technique that they used, you'll be fine. I'm holding on to that with all the roughness inside. You can pull it some more off. Actually, I'm going to fold that under, and then it's out of the way. If this has been stapled on top of the cardboard, just pull the cardboard and it'll all come out. That was a lot quicker to do than I thought it was going to be. Fold that under there like that. Okay, I'm just going to lift a couple more of these so I can peel back the foam just a little bit further. I can remove all of it from here, but I'll see what I need to do in a minute. I'm going to just carry on down this second side here. You really need to try to get all of the staples out if you can, and they don't cause you problems later. There's one caught right on the corner here. Let's see if I can get rid of that one. They usually put 2 or 3 in a corner so that it holds. Sometimes have to dig a bit deeper to find everything, especially if there's 2 or 3 layers holding it. Sometimes they'll push that up and staple underneath, so just make sure you have a jolly good look. And then I'm going to pull this until I can't pull that. I'm just going to carry on down this side and fold this under as I go until all of this is off. Now I've undone all of this, I can slide that off like that. Then I need to take this cover off. So it's a case of look for all of the staples because they've got them in various places. They won't all be low like that. I've got one up here, another one here. So I'm just going to go along one side to get them all out. When I've got a row done, I'll just pull them out. Oh, I'll also make sure that I've got any out that were on the outer piece as well. If I can't find them, I'll lift the fabric and then just carry on easing as I go all the way around this piece. And this should take the top off. That's all off. It's just this corner now to go through. I'm going to see if I can actually get this off now. I'm going to put this to one side because I'm going to use that later. And then I'm just going to see if I can release this foam from the outside fabric. This is when you find the odd staple that you thought you got out. Hopefully there aren't too many of them. So that's pulling down to there. Oh golly gosh, it's got well and truly stuck on at some point. It's not a big deal if it tears it. So anyway, hopefully it'll come off like that on all 4 sides. Remove the base from the foam. So now it's 2 separate pieces and that's how we need it. So this is the top of the footstool. What I like to do is when I'm putting a fabric on is to see where the center falls. I can't center the pattern this way because I have to put the piping here. So that is as far over. And actually it's not that bad. The girls are kind of off the center point, and we've got some trees here to kind of make it more equal, but I am concerned about how much is from here and here. The best thing is to take measurements. I'm going to work out where I want the center of this pattern to be and then work out the measurements on the seat cushion. I'm going to have to apologise for the background noise. We have a storm going through. What I need to do is measure this, and this comes to 1.5 wide. So I always do lines like that when I want to know something, 31.5, and then I'm going to go like that to the depth of the cushion, which is 25.5. The height should be about 4.5. Perfect. So I'm going to put here 4.5. What I've done is the width the depth and then the height. And because it's a small number, I know that that's what I mean. Now always try to have the pattern facing you. Makes life a lot easier. I know that this one's going to be too short. That's the one at the top. So I'm going to just measure down to the next pattern, which is here. I have to measure from where this line is across for the width. So I'm only really interested in the height of the pattern. I'm going to sit here and ponder this a little bit. Probably go from here to here. The top of the heads are all in one line. We've got the dog here, which kind of brings it down. We've got some kind of thing here and the flowers. So I'm going to say that the whole pattern is probably from here to the top of the blue here. So I'm just going to measure and divide that in half. I won't be too far out, I don't think. If I divide her, she's 6.5 inches. Let me put a pin in. I always like to use pins because it kind of helps. From there to the bottom of the dog is 8 inches, which is halfway there. So if I take from there to there, that's 4 inches on her. So I'm thinking that might be halfway through. From here to the bottom of these rocks is 16. I think here is my halfway mark. I think I'll be happy with it there. Which means I've got to add on 5.5 inches at the top and the bottom. So what I'm going to do, fold it in half along there. If I straighten the two salvages, I should be able to work out where I need to start cutting from, because it should be even. The pin mark is there, so I'm going to just pull that down, straighten out the salvages. Half of 26.5, that makes it 13.25. I'm actually going to cut it at 14 just in case I want to make any alterations, because that's oversized. I've got 1.5 inches to play with, so I'm just going to pop that there for now. I've marked that. I'm going to nick my fabric there like that, just lay it out and make sure that that's where I think it should be. So I'm going to measure it separately with my ruler. So I've got my end of the ruler there and there, and it's 28 inches. So I've got a little bit of leeway. I'm going to pop this the other way. I've got a long length of stuff that I don't want on there. That's the bottom of my pattern there, and that's the top. I'm going to fold the fabric along the bottom. So again, I'm going to put right sides together and the salvages together. I'm going to fold the fabric in half, like that. Salvages together as far as I can make them, like that. And shake the fabric out and smooth it, and I'll be able to cut along that line. I'm also going to look at the way these threads go to make sure that they look square on. I'm happy, so I'm literally just going to cut along this fold like this, all the way across the fabric. Gives you a straight line. And then just make sure that the salvage on the other side is equal to, otherwise you'll have a wonky cut. Now I've got one straight edge to work with. I'm going to measure for 32.5 here, so there's my 1/2 inch measurement along, and I'm just going to put a clip on the other side like that, because this is too wide for my table. So just double check my measurements. Although the fabric's a little bit stretchy, I need to make sure that it's where it needs to be. And there's my cut, and I'm literally going to cut on up. I'm going to use the weaving lines, and some of you might be able to see them and others might not, but over the years I've learnt to use them. So I'm literally going to go along the warp thread. The warp is the one that runs from top to bottom of the fabric, and the weft is the one that goes from left to right. When I employed people would laugh at me for doing this, but gives you the straightest line. Now that I've got a smaller piece of fabric, I'm literally going to do the same as I did before. Fold that along the salvage, smooth it out, and cut. It's overcut top and bottom, so it should be fine. So now I'm going to lay this back over and determine where I really want it. Now the width I'm happy with, that is perfect. I'm thinking that might be more centered. It's really difficult to decide because it's such an oversized piece of furniture. Sometimes when you prop things up you can determine a little bit better. I'm going to raise the center a little bit. If I measure from here to here and make it 25.5, and then just make sure I've got my added 1/2 inch here, 1/2 inch at the top for turnings. I have decided to put the blue on the footstool, and I'm not going to need to determine which end is the right way or not because one end has a salvage on it. I will be cutting these at 1.5 inch widths because I'm sewing them into place, and I need a few, so I'm going to just cut that at 1.5. I think that might do one side, and if I have to cut more, I'll cut more. So I'm just going to cut up to my 1.5 inch mark on each strip. I'm just going to carry on going on until I've got to the other end of this piece. I'm going to make this piping up, and in order to make sure that it's all facing the same way, I'm going to put the selvage on the outside like that, and then this next piece I've got the fabric facing up there and the new piece going down with the selvage at the top. I can sew from here to this corner and make a straight line. Pop it down there. The length of the stitch has to be either a 2.6 or a 2.8. That's my first length, so I'm going to fold that in half, place the next one on top again. The selvage is the end I'm working from. I've got a few pieces here, so I'm going to put them all together. Now I like to use a piping foot. It's got a groove in it so that the piping cord can fit through, and I will install that. And all I do is I place the piping cord in the center of the fabric and fold it over so the raw sides are together. Place that under the foot with the piping going through the groove. Extend the stitch to the longest one, which is a 5. Pinch your raw sides together like that. Guide the piping through until you have it all done. When you come to the join, split the two pieces apart so that there's the beginning of the next set, and cut with about 1/4 inch seam allowance. Open your seam allowance flat, place your piping cord between it all, and as you fold it over, just make sure it stays flat. That takes the bulk out of the join. As you get to sewing closer, double check everything's flat. Sometimes it pings open if it's relaxed. And pull it on through and carry on going to the next join. I'm going to attach the piping to the top. I usually start at the side if it's a cushion. I don't want to start in the middle because there'll probably be a join there, so I am going to just start a little way back from the middle, which should be about there. Pop that on. Now my cording has to run 1/2 inch from the outside edge, so when I'm measuring, I'm going to use the side of this as my guide to the 1/2 inch. This, you'll see, kind of goes in and out. That's the way it was cut. I'm going to leave it on 5 for the stitch length. I'm just going to carry on sewing down. Coming to the first corner. Usually I put corners in. As I've got close to the edge, I'm going to cut a number of little slots in at about less than 1/4 inch distance. I'm going to put a curve in there like that. I'm going to make sure that this new edge is about 1/2 inch in from the end, and then carry on sewing. All you're doing is pivoting, going sideways on the fabric. It's quite springy. I don't want that, so I'm just resting the piping on top like that and pinching the two fabrics together. It allows this not to be stretched out of shape. And I'm going to carry on sewing to the next corner, and I'll do the same again. Now I've just come around this corner and I have the selvage there. So what I'm doing is I'm lining the stitch mark with the join of the selvage to the pattern. I'm using that as my guide. I'm not pulling the fabric, I'm just resting piping on top of the fabric, which is quite important when I'm going to have to match it to another piece of fabric the same size. Okay, so I'm at my last corner. There's the start of my piping there. I'm going to sew this towards the other piece of piping. I'm not going to get terribly close. I can't use that part of the piping, so I'm going to overlap it by about 2 inches and cut it. And now I've got enough fabric for when I want to join the piping together. Now the depth of the cushion is 4.5 inches, so I need to cut widths of 5.5 inches. And I've got the mark here which tells me where the top of the fabric is. So the pile goes down, that's the way it's going to shine better. I'm going to cut a length off here at 5.5 inches. So I use the mark of the 5.5 there, and then just cut up to the top here. Before I get too far, I'm just going to put a small V. So I'm just going to carry on going to the end. Now I'm going to make the band up to go around the top there, and I've cut 3 pieces, because I'm using up scraps. Each piece I've cut a little V out of the top, and something I've noticed over the years is if you put your fabrics, and so from the top of the pile down, you are more likely to not have your fabric walk as much as if you're trying to go against the grain. The other thing I've learnt over the years, if you can, and I've got a fabric here that's got lines in it from where it was woven together, and I'm going to line the 2 raw edges together, and with a bit of luck I might be able to sew down one of these, or somewhere close to. I've got my 2 tops of the pile there going down to the bottom. Got my 2 raw edges together, put a 1/2 inch seam on that. I'm going to extend it to a 3, and I'm just going to start sewing. When I get to the end, I'm going to reverse and see how neat this band of stitching is. I think because it looks like it's in the grooves of the way it's woven, I think that's going to look pretty good and not very noticeable that there's 3 pieces. So here's my second piece, and here's my third piece. Now the trick here is to make sure that all of your edges are exact. So I'm going to just take that one off as well, make sure that's straight, because if that's wonky and I try to put a straight side to a wonky side, it won't look very even. So I'm just going to pop that one on too, and again forward and reverse. At the bottom again, forward and reverse. Double check that that's in the right place too. Yeah, I'm thinking that's going to be pretty close. Nobody's going to notice. Now before I put the side on, I'm going to have to join the piping together. So I'm going to snip back a few stitches on this side like this, and same on the other side like that. And I'm going to lay them flat, move my piping cord so it's both on the same side like that, and on this one fold that back 45 degrees, and that gives me an ideal shape for the seam. I'm just going to cut that back, and the other one I will be doing the same, but I'm going to roll this cut piece underneath the second piece that I'll be cutting, and I am going to make sure that there's at least an inch over. So I'm going to do it there, fold that over at 45 degrees, so it might have altered it slightly but not by very much. I'm also going to cut that like that. I've got them both going the same way. I have in the past cut them so that they go different directions, and that's very irritating, so just take your time doing it. Pinch together where I think the seam should go, which is halfway along. I've given myself about 1/2 inch seam allowance on here, and pop that under, straighten it out like that so the 2 raw edges are going together, and I'm just going to sew that across on a 2.6. There I should have my seam. Pull the seam open like that, lay one side of the piping down and the other one across, and see if that's straight on there, and it is. There's no wrinkling once it's in place. I've changed the foot out for the piping foot, and I prefer to do them separately, so I'm just going to fold that over, pull the fabric back, slot that under there, extend the stitch to 5 raw edges together and start sewing. Now I'm going to pull this one back and trim the one that's being sewn into place back just a little bit at a 45-degree angle. I prefer to do it like that. I don't always, but I prefer. Make sure my seams are open, carry on sewing a little bit more, and I'm nearly at the join for the piping cord. I'm going to hold the piping cord over to the top of the one that's going in, cut that also at a 45-degree angle, slot that in behind the one that I'm sewing in, pinch everything in together, and now I've got a nice smooth join, and then I'm just going to carry on going to the other end. Remove it, put the piping cord back underneath, go back a few stitches and sew that with the under part at 1/2 inch, and this will go in where it needs to. That's been sewn in. There's my little V, so that's going to go at this end so that when you're looking at the cushion, the pile of the fabric goes down. I need to put a centre mark on the front like that, which would be round about there, and on the back of the cushion. Because I'm using leftover fabric, I don't have a lot of fabric to mess with, so usually you'd have marks on the centre sides, not the centre back and front. centre mark on the border for the cushion. Put my centre mark and centre mark together like that. And usually I'd start sewing there. I'm going to move the fabric to the back of the seat cushion like this. So having marked to the centre of the back, I'm just going to put my fabric, the raw sides together, underneath the piping foot. I'm going to put it on a number 3 length and a 3 width, which cinches it a little bit into the side there. With the raw edges next to each other, I'm just going to sew all the way around. The gold fabric in this case has to run at 1/2 inch. Now I'm not pulling the fabric, what I'm doing is laying the fabric down on top so it's flat and even. And I'll work my way to the first corner. Now when I get to the corners, because I didn't put sharp corners in, I put rounded ones in, I'm just going to trim the fabric back like that so that I can actually see how I'm doing as I'm pulling around, because I need this to follow the 1/2 inch mark. All I'm going to do is keep this as straight as I can for as long as I can. And as I get to the rounded corner, I'm just going to pull it flat, which means this is going to ripple and hopefully not on the inside. And then again, all that on round. And as you can see, this automatically goes up at the back, and that's quite normal. And lay it back flat. Work on round the cushion. Now I've got to my first seam, which I'm going to open up and make sure it's flat. It's not very noticeable, so I think I'll be okay with it. Pull that across. Usually you'd have a seam on either side or at 4 corners. I don't like doing 4 corners. As I get there, I'm just going to make sure it's still flat, because sometimes when it goes up on the foot plate here, it alters it. And I'll work my round to the next seam. And again, I'm coming straight into the next corner, so I'm going to pinch that in and sew on round. Just take your time on these rounded corners. You just need them as even as possible. Now I'm working towards the centre. My centre mark at the front has actually moved a little bit, but I'm not going to be worried about that. It's the centre mark on the back that I'm more concerned about. That has to be right. Now I'm coming up towards where I started, the centre of the back, and I'm just going to carry on going there. If I was worried about centering on the front, I would have started at the front, but I didn't. I started at the back, so it was just to make sure that the seam was where I wanted it on the back side. Push both sides of my new seam in to where the center mark is, like that. When I'm happy with that, I'm going to cut the extra fabric off. Just make a nick in there and cut that down. I can follow the lines again. I'm going to push the new raw edges together like that and push them in, and then put a pin where my fingernails are, and that's where my sew line will be. I'll undo a few stitches, I think, just to give me a little bit more room. Sometimes when you've got piping cord, you get a little bit more wriggle room than you would on a flat seam. So there we are, that gives me where I need to be. Hold that in a flat line, I think that usually helps, and then slide that underneath where you're going to sew. Make sure your raw edges are exactly together, and then sewing with the pile which goes down. I'm going to start at the back and do forward and back, holding the bottom of my seam together. I'm just going to carry on sewing, keeping this as even as I can to 1/2 inch. Now yours might vary, so I'm going to see how that works. If I pull that flat, it fits in nicely. So I'm going to just change my sewing foot to a piping, and that'll finish that off. I've just found this piece, and I'm going to see if it'll do the 32.5 length, which I think it will. There we go, 32.5 there. I'm just going to cut straight along because I'm sure it's big enough. It will do for this project. It doesn't have to be perfect. It was the way it was rolled on which has given it this ripply effect. Sometimes when it's rolled onto the cardboard roller, it does that. It's irritating, but just one of those things. It'll stretch out. As it's going on the underside of the cushion, it won't really matter. And then the width was 26.5, which there we are, 26.5. Yeah, I think I'll take it from this side. Looks relatively straight. And then I won't go into the marks here where it's pinned out to dry. So I'll cut this 26.5 all the way down. Now I'm going to attach the piping to the underside of the cushion. I'm going to do exactly the same. Put it 1/2 inch in from the outside. And I actually ironed this so it flattened it a little bit better, not that anybody's going to see. Now I always prefer to do the underside out of one whole piece of fabric. I have been known to make bands and put them on. I just prefer the easier way. Pull that round like I did before, a little bit of a curve in it, and go round. Continue down all 4 sides. Just going to close this up. I've opened both sets of seams so that I can get my fabric to be able to fold okay. Now this one I'm going to fold back 45 degrees. Give me a nice edge like that. And then, this is something I've done wrong many a time. I've got my raw edge going this way and I need to have it matching. Fold that part over 45 degrees and cut that too, so they're both facing. I've cut it opposite ways many a time and then you have to go and put a piece in. So basically that's my new line. I got 1/4 inch, put them across like that, so this is at a right angle. I'll pop it under here and sew it. I've popped that down to a 2.4 for now. I'm just going to sew straight across. Pull it out and it fits exactly. If it was a bit gappy one way or the other, then you need to alter your seam or unpick further each side and reset it. Put your stitch length on the longest, fold your piping into your allowance there, pop that under. Some people are quite happy just doing it all in one go. No right or wrong way, it's whatever you like. I just find it easier to control where I'm putting the piping in and make sure it's even. So I'm going to cut that back at 45 degrees. Lay this one down and cut the same so it slots behind the other one. I'm just going to slot that behind like that, and then make sure my seams in the piping band are open. Roll that over and cinch it shut. You've done that. Lay it on the fabric, pull it into place, sew all the way across, and that is now ready to go on the base. I'm going to reattach the foam that I took off originally. I'm not going to worry about the fact there's going to be a bit of a ridge there. That will hide when everything else is in place. And all I do is I kind of push this foam from the top down to meet and then just attach. I'll do that all the way around. Doesn't have to be perfect. I'm going to measure from the outside corner here, and then I'm going to just roll it round to this corner, which comes to 56 inches. That's annoying because most fabrics are 54 wide. And then I need the height. And I'm going to come in a bit. I'm going to make that 14 inches. So it's from the bottom edge here and then quite a ways in. So 14 by as wide as I can make it to the outside edge. I'm going to show you how to pattern match. It's not a very clear fabric, this one. But all I'm going to do is fold these back so the circles are in line on the back end, like that, all the way down. And I'm going to use the iron to just press in where I want the seam to go. Now, don't do it on too high a number, otherwise it sometimes stick. I usually have it on a number 4, which usually doesn't stick anything to the base, but it does give you a bit of steam as well. So that's my sew line for this project, nice and crisp. This is quite bobbly with fire retardancy, so I'm going to use my silicone spray and spray the back like that so it pulls through under there. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to pattern match. This has a half circle at this end, which I need to match at this end too. The circles on here go about halfway through, so it should be more or less a mirror image. Having pinched it into place like that, I'm going to open that up and slide that under, and then, now having lined that up, I'm going to line the next one up as well down the center. So I'm going to pinch that and that together, and my line for sewing is that fold, and I'm going to stretch it as I do it. You could do it over every pattern, but it works better if you sort of line up the top and a distance down and then pull it through. This center has to go along my ironed line. This isn't the best fabric to be showing you how to do this, and if you pull the fabrics about evenly, it shouldn't walk against each other. I'm going to cut that back to about 1/2 inch from my sew line. This fabric was 54 inches wide, and I've just taken a good couple of inches off. I now have to match up another piece. On this one, I'm actually going to have to move it over quite a way to make sure that meets, which is a bit of a bind because I'm losing a good couple of inches. But here again, spray it down on the back, slot it under my sew line here. I'm going to quickly spray down that to start it. Then again at the bottom, make sure everything is in line, kind of wriggle it and then pinch it together like that, and it should open up nicely to where it needs to be. And again, keep it a little bit taut. If it's taut, it's not going to wriggle anywhere. And if you're unsure, you could always put a chalk mark down where you want to sew. And again, I'll trim that back. Now I'm going to be putting this into place. This is the border that goes on the side of the footstool. I'm going to do it with the right sides in. It makes it a little bit easier putting your corners in. Straighten that up and pull it around here. All I'm going to do for now is just pin this together so it's not going anywhere. Come and sort this out in a minute, and I'll change my mind about 3 or 4 times because it will move. I'm going to straighten that up so I have about 1 inch underneath. Pop that underneath 1 inch and pull it up. The top of these circles is just rolling round on the inside. That's more or less in the center. Now coming to the first corner, push your fabric down as far as you can. And I usually do a 45-degree angle on each corner. So I'm going to start my sew line here and then work my way to the corner where I might need to shape it. And this takes a couple of times because as you pull it in, you're going to tighten it. You don't want it overly tight, otherwise you can't pull it into shape when you've made it. I'm going to go at a slight angle here so it goes up and over. I'm going to work my way to this corner, and again straighten all that fabric along here. It gets snagged up on things, so if it's not straight first time, don't worry. Pull your 45 degrees in here and again pin that angle. I like to be able to sew from the same direction each time, as straight as possible. Pop that in here. Where it goes up and over, I put a little up and over in my pinning so that I know where it is. I'm going to recheck these sides. This one could come in just a wee bit over the top here, but not by very much. So I'll do that there. Gives a bit more shaping to the rounded part here. Again, making sure that the top of the circles goes over the top here and into this corner. I'll straighten that out. In the meantime, I'm just going to put a pin down into here to hold it while I work in this corner. Make sure my circles are where they need to be. This goes under about 1 inch, and then again pin. That'll hold that while I mess with this. Pull that up. My circles go over the top. That pulls down about 1 inch, and I'm going to come into this corner. Now the end of here, it's in the middle of the first full circle here, so I'm going to do the same on this side. Put that there, and then my first full circle is here, so I'm going to cut back to here. Literally going to cut to the end of that first circle so I know where I'm going to, and then fold that halfway through. I'm going to fold it back that way so I have a seam allowance. I know the pattern isn't going to match exactly because I can only have so many patterns matching, so I'll put a pin on each circle to hold it. That's going to be a straight line, and I'm going to ease this one up to it, pin it back, and I'm just going to cut down, give a generous seam here. Actually, I'm going to go halfway through the following circle. I'm just going to fold that where I think it's going to be. Once it's sewn together, it will all pull in. Put my 45 degrees in here, open my seam. That has to be open. And here again, I'm going to pull that in tight on that side. Put my 45 in to this corner here. Shape it by putting a little pin at that angle there. Fold that underneath like this. along the top, because the top is the part that I'm most concerned about, and I'm just going to pin this into position here to the top and to the bottom. Actually the inside has to go up a little bit, and here. Pop this in like this. Now I know my seam here has to go along the side of this circles here, which also means that I do have the ability to put this corner in. I'll very carefully unpin it and pin it back together when I'm ready. I'm going to put this at a 45-degree angle, remove my pin that's holding it into place, and pin this into place. Usually you've got your seam down here. Because I'm using what's left over from other projects, I don't have very many choices, just as long as it looks good at the end of the day. That's all my friend's worried about. And this should match nicely with his golden chair that he's ended up with. Put one in at an angle so I remember to go around the corner. Very carefully ease it up like that on all four corners with all my marks in place. I'm going to put the corners in first. Spray the silicone on both sides. Keep my edges running straight there. And then I'm going to follow my pin line. So forward and back. I'm not going to pull this, otherwise it will stretch. I'm just going to keep it even. As I sew towards each pin, I'm removing each pin as I go. And then when I get to the last two, I'm going to just hook round slightly so that I manage to get that rounded look. And then forward and back again. Cut the threads and then cut to about 1/2 inch in from the outside, because you don't need all that fabric. Then work your way to the next one, do the same. Now I'm at the last one where I'm actually sewing a seam in as well. I'm going to remove the first pin and pop it back in just onto the top fabric like that. I'm going to do the same with the second one just for now so that I can open this seam up. I need the seam in before I put the rest in. And I'm going to pull out these pins here. I'm going to mark the outside of these circles because that's where my sew line has to be, just like this. It's all back to front and just takes a little minute to think about. Pop that down. That's the right side. I'm going to just silicone down here where my sew line is, and I'm going to pop that underneath. Now this is when you've got to make sure you've got all your tops together, otherwise you mess up. So I'm just going to check that that's all the same layer going in. If I mess up, I'm going to have a problem on my hands. This side, it's midway through that circle. So I'm going to line up my midway on the side, fold it halfway through the circle, hold that in position. I'm going to eyeball the center of the circle and pinch it to the outside edge of those circles. Very scientific, I must say. Then I'm just going to sew. Reverse and then carry on down all the way to the bottom. Remember to take any pins out if you've got any, and reverse when you get there and cut it back. Just going to put that corner back in. There's my new seam. Spray both sides. Make sure that that is even along the top edge and line up with the first pins, because I put the pins exactly where they came out of. Work towards this corner here and forward and reverse, and again cut this back to within 1/2 inch of the seam. Now with the base, fold each side in like that so it's nice and even. It doesn't matter if it kind of bows out at points, that's really not a problem. Pop the base of the cushion on top, face down, so that when it's all sewn together it looks like that. Put corner to corner like that. I'll just pin across for now on all four corners when I'm happy with where those corners are. And then again on the other side. My corners match up there and again there. But I'm not sure whether that's going to work where I want it. Tip it over. Having flipped it over, I'm working from one corner to the next, trying to keep everything flat. And then I'll pin here in the direction I will be sewing. It makes life a lot easier if you can do that. I'm going to flatten out that seam too. I try to put as many pins in as I can because I really want it to be as firm and unadjustable, if that's a word. I don't want it moving as I'm sewing it into position. And I'm going to have to go around 2 times so that it is absolutely secure. Just make sure you haven't stuck it to the table. I've done that on more than one occasion. It's just this last one. Pick this up and turn it so I can get this last corner in. Just make sure my corners are on the corners. Pull that out. Now I'm going to have a little bit of a ripple in there for some reason. That sometimes happens. I'm not going to worry about it. It's the nature of the product. So here again, I'm going to just pin that in to place. That would just come out as I sew. I'll just pull it real tight and it'll go in nicely. Just check for pins underneath, and I'm going to move this one to slot all of this underneath the foot so that the seat cushion is facing up. Then I can see where I'm going. Put silicone on here. I'll add to it as I get to where I need to go. I've got it on a 3. I'm running the side of the foot along the raw edge here. I'm going to start sewing. It's a bit awkward to grab hold of, but I'm going to pinch the fabric from here to here together. Pull the pin that's on the corner out and sew into the corner. Needle down and twist the fabric around the needle. I'm going to pop that back down again, and I'm going to pinch hold of halfway along this piece. Now there is a slight difference on here, so I'm just going to straighten the line up and remove that pin. Sew it in a straight line. Move this pin, this one and this one. Pinch my corner into place. Pull the fabric apart as tight as I can. Open up this seam like that and let that sew into place here too. And again, needle down, twist the fabric around. Now there was a little bit of excess here, more silicone, and I'm going to repeat the same thing along here. Pull to the center like that, remove the pin and then pull it out. And again to this last end, there's a little bit of a ripple that should all come in a minute. And I repeat this on all 4 sides. Keep the seam open, and when I get all the way around, I'm just going to sew a second layer of stitches in here just to make sure it's really tight. People, I included, have a habit of picking everything up by the top cushion. You don't want it all falling apart. So I'm going to cut basically to this corner here from here, and I'm going to cut along here into this corner like that, but where the join is, I'm just going to put a small nick like that, only small. Here I'm going to do the same. I'm going to put a small nick there, and then into this corner here. Should line up. I like picking the fights I'm going to win. Fighting these into containers is not easy if you've got one zip. Fold all of this in like this, and here's the top. I know that the corners are meant to go in here like that. So all I'm going to do is pin along to each one, center everything, and I know that's in the center, so all I'm going to do is make sure that that's centered there. So that center and that center can go here. Pin that with the border down like that, and then I'm just going to work my way around pinning. Sometimes pins make things a lot easier. Fold all of that in, carry on going around the corner. I'll adjust it as I get to wherever I'm getting to, just to make sure it all lines in. Now like on here where there's a seam there, I can line up my corner like that, work out where the seam goes, and then put the seam to that mark. And I'll do the same on the other side, and that should keep everything running where it needs to be. See, there's a big gap there, so somewhere in here it's not quite right. Now I have a center mark marked on there. So again, I can line up the corners like that, work out where my center mark is, and then just pull it across like that. As I sew it in, I'll make adjustments so that it all runs smoothly. It's better to only get one length not going in, not all of them. When I first started out, if I got something wrong, it would be a really big mess. As I've got older, I've worked out how to avoid all those big messes. That fits in nicely. I'm going to start on my center mark here, pop that underneath my piping foot, make sure my seam is flat there. That's another reason for having all of this open is so that I can actually feel the fabric underneath as I go. Squirt on there, and I'm doing it on a number 3 with the needle moved over a little bit too. Sew into the first corner. Make sure everything's where it needs to be and adjust. Now all I'm doing is I'm pinching the two fabrics together but pulling them apart. Forces all the fabric to go into line. As I come to the first corner, I'm going to trim back like I did on the other side so I can see what I'm doing, and then I'll let that roll into place just like I did on the top of this cushion seat. When all of that is sewn together, pull your footstool cushion and cover all the way around the right way. And I usually do a quick look at the seams when I'm doing it so that I know everything's gone in completely right. If you find threads like that, just nip them out as you go, especially on the underside. It's easier to do it when it's not attached. It looks like I did a pretty good job. There we go, not bad at all. With the existing cover, I am literally just going to cut this off. I am not fighting with it. Actually, this was a nice one. This was a well-made one. It's got a cover on it. I am impressed. Some of them are really cheap and nasty. This is the top. I'm actually going to pop it the other way up like this because this was underneath, so it won't have been used and abused. And now I am going to fight to get this cover on it. These are hard to sometimes get on. So work one end in. Because it's got this nice calico cover on, it's going to be a lot easier to push into place because it just slides. Work it the other end. This will come out and this will. Hopefully it won't damage my stitching as I force it in there. My personal choice to do it this way than to put a zip in it. There we are, that's all in. Tip it over. Make sure it's where I think I want everything. So I'm going to flip it over again. And this is where the next hard part comes. I've just cut a piece of fabric. Just pop it underneath like that. Make it as smooth as you can. It won't really matter because I'm going to start sewing these back together. Push that as much as I can into the center. Put a couple of pins in like that. And then I'm going to pull this one in also. Now these are going to vary as I get to them. I just like to start off with them as close as possible to where I want them. And that one's going to go there. My nick here is going to line up with the top of that. Push that into the side, flatten that fabric out under there as much as I can. Then using some upholstery thread, stitch down and through the fabric and back up the other side. It stabilizes my stitches. Start that off there. Don't go into the cushion underneath if you can help it. And then pull and push your fabric until it all matches up. Go about 1/4 of an inch either side of your seam and it should hold steady. Now always start on the outside because that's where there's less pressure. Slowly work your way to the inside. Doesn't take too long to do. Like big homeward bounding stitches. You just got to make sure that this is flat because you're not trying to cinch it in as such, you're just trying to hold it in place. I could put a zip in. I am not forcing all that cushion into a zip. I know which battles I'm going to win and that is not one of them. You can cut wavy lines in if you're unsure whether you're going to be able to match it properly. Sometimes you'll have flower patterns or stripes or something that you can match your pattern to, which helps. So long as this finishes at that point, this side has gone in okay. Taken out the 2 pins that were holding this in place, and I'm just going to finish up this little length here. As long as that and that one match like that, this side will be fine. Overstitch that to hold it in place. So that's my first piece sewn in. I'm going to twist it. Because my next piece is going to be this piece because this piece comes into here. Push that all down into that corner, pull that into here as close as I can to the top here. I'm going to pin that into place like that. That's as close as I'm going to get it for now. I can start sewing from this corner. Smooth as much of that into place as I can before I get there. This will cinch in quite quickly on the corner. I'm going to just start sewing up here, and as I move up it will get easier to hold into place. The first one's usually the easiest. It gets more difficult from that point on. When you hear it go ping, it's pinging off the original cover, the white one that's under there. I don't want to catch that at all because I want to be able to move the cushion around in here if I need to. It does need to go through that second layer. That's keeping everything stable. The thing to remember when you're doing this is you're going to have to be twisting this in so that this actually meets up with there, and because it's cut on the bias it might stretch slightly, so I'm just going to push that in just a little bit to where I think it's going to be going in, and a few more stitches and then look again. Always keep an eye on your work. Technically all of this should fit exactly the way it came off. I'm going to work again at repinning this back into place so that actually, there you go, there it meets. I'll readjust as I get there to make sure it fits properly. Got my second side in. It's all ripply under here, which is quite normal. That's what happens. Now this side here has to come into this point here. I'm going to pull that up to fit on here as a straight line. I'm going to pin that into place. Means that actually has to be pulled over too. I'm going to start my third side. Push all that nice fabric under there as far as I can. Pin this here in line with that. Pop that there into that corner. And I know it's not quite in there, but it's enough to get this side sewn in. Or this side. Doesn't really matter which side I do, but I usually do it on this side first. So I've got my ends together like I did on the others. Just overstitch a couple of places here. And then I'm going to just carry on sewing on up. Pulling that as I go. This should be almost in a straight line on all four sides. Once it's in, I can rig the cushion around in there. And this has to end on that line here with this here. At the moment you can see this is bowing and this is the last piece to be pulled in. Once this is pulled in, this will straighten up. When it's all sewn in, just make sure that the piping is where you want it, because this is the only time you're going to get to move it around. Because once it's on the cushion base, it is stuck. I think I like the way that's come in. Looks pretty even all the way around. I'm going to pop that on top of there like that. Line it up as best as I can. And start pulling this into place, but I can't pull it all the way down on one side. I have to do it in little sections. Get a little bit in, get a little bit more in, like that. See if I can get the seams to go in flat, otherwise they'll look a bit bulky. So I've got to keep coming back to the seams and then working a little bit of this side. And here again, make sure the seams are flat. That's why you need to sew them in flat at the top. And then slowly work all of this in to the side. Make sure that's flat as it goes in. When it's pulled in and under, it won't ripple and mark. Should be about an inch underneath. There is an art to this. Here's my seam here. And I'm going to see if I can get that to go in as straight as I can, up and down. And I'll secure that first. Having done that, I'm just going to work my way towards the first corner. I'm not pulling it this way or anything, I'm just pulling it straight up. It's not like a chair, because these corners have to go in straight too. And again, work your way around the footstool. When you come to the centre, just pull the centre up and over. Work towards the corner. Preferably it should come all the way over to the front here, but if it doesn't, don't worry too much. When you've worked into the corner, just pull the corner up and put it in the 45-degree angle. So this will come over like that and it will be nice and sharp. The bottom cloth, which I had to leave in, I'm just going to pull that out to about 1/4 of an inch from the outside edge. I'm going to stick that into as I go. Then I don't have to come back. Now I've straightened this out and pulled it tight. Thank you for joining me today. I hope that you've gained some useful information on how to do one of these Ottomans or a footstool, whichever you want to call them, and that I've given you some decent tips on how to put one back together. Please subscribe and hit the bell button if you want to hear more from me. And in the meantime, take care. See you later. Ciao.